I very much feel the same way about the NA industry. I feel like it's incredibly collaborative. People are looking at the bigger picture across the board of what is the shift that we're trying to make within the world. How do we leave the world in a better place as we move forward? And it's not necessarily like anti-alcohol. It's about pro what it can be, and having a world of options and that surrounds people in their health and wellness journey, wherever that fits within it, and having the options that fit whatever who you are or whatever the occasion is. And that's really exciting to be a part of, is that collaboration and feeling like we're doing more than just making a drink to have in the afternoon or instead of a beer.
Welcome to the Sober Edge podcast, inspiration for alcohol-free living. I'm your host, Terry Patterson, functional nutritionist and This Naked Mind senior coach. The Sober Edge is a place to explore the infinite possibilities on the other side of drinking. In a culture soaked in booze, discover the wonder and joy of taking a different path. Meet real people living lives of purpose and passion, learn the truth behind the alcohol myths, and get ready to be motivated, inspired, and astounded by what is possible with the Sober Edge. You're listening to the Sober Edge podcast, episode 149. Yes, we're almost at episode 150, and I said we because it feels like this is a joint venture and collaborative project. So thank you so much for tuning in each and every week, sharing the podcast with friends, and please go on and rate and review one of the episodes because it really does help other people find the podcast. So today, I want to talk to you a little bit about the power of yes. And this was inspired by the conversation that I had with the CEO of Hoplark Brands, Betsy Frost. So she is featured on this episode of the Sober Edge podcast, and we have such a wonderful conversation about her background, her philosophy of yes, and the philosophy of Hoplark Brands, and this incredible beverage company that is so powerfully near to my philosophy of zero alcohol, zero sugar, zero calories. And what a beautiful offering Hoplark has in this NA beverage space, but they are far more than just a non-alcoholic beverage company. And I had so much fun asking Betsy all about the magic of hops, what are hopheads, and how can you have a hoppy brew that has no sugar and no alcohol? Why is it a 0.0 and not a 0.5? And so we get into all of that in this episode. And Betsy is so generous. She is offering listeners of this podcast a 35% coupon code to sample their delicious hop beverages, Hoplark teas, Hoplark 0.0, and Hoplark sparkling water. I cannot wait to try my own 35% off group of products. So be sure and take advantage of that. The link is in the show notes, as is the coupon code. And I cannot wait to see what you do with your own opportunity to say yes and. So I want to share a little bit about Betsy's background and her bio. And then we're going to jump right into this very special episode. Betsy is a purpose-driven marketing and P&L leader who combines CPG experience with an entrepreneurial mindset to build businesses, brands, and big ideas. She drives growth through empathetic and strategic brand building, differential sales partnerships, bold innovation, and inspired, connected teams. An entrepreneur at heart, Betsy has been working with small and large businesses across different growth stages, from startups to turnarounds, to develop business, marketing, and go-to-market strategies. She is currently the Chief Executive Officer at Hoplark, a non-alcoholic brewery in Boulder, Colorado that is reframing what real flavor in beverage can be by unlocking the hops experience in new categories and occasions beyond beer. Prior to Hoplark, Betsy served as the president of Dry Soda and spent 15 years at General Mills running P&L and brand strategy from brands from Cheetos to Yoplait, ran a company-wide new product incubator launching nearly 100 platforms for the company, and managed a portfolio of brands and products for the company for the convenience and food service channel. Betsy also has over 15 years' experience mentoring and advising women leaders. At General Mills, she co-led women mentor circles and had the privilege to lead the Women in Leadership group across the organization. For 3 years, she has actively mentored over 100 folks across different career stages to help individuals tap into their passion and potential to have more fun and impact at work. She is also a mentor and advisor to a number of female founders and sits on the advisory boards of Maza and Bim Bam Boo. I love this. Her philosophy for life is so inclusive, and I think you're going to find this conversation enlightening. We touch on all kinds of topics, from what's going on with big brands getting into the NA market, as well as what's happening with our old tried and true favorites like Topo Chico suddenly putting out a spiked version. So stay tuned, enjoy the episode, and don't forget to take advantage of that 35% off coupon. And finally, if you're ready to say no to booze and yes to your real, whole, beautiful life, please get in touch, because I would love to help you figure out your next steps. Again, go to the show notes for more information and find out how we can connect. Well, hey, everyone, it's Terry back with another edition of the Sober Edge podcast. And hang on to your seats, get those earbuds adjusted, because we are going to have a incredible conversation with my new friend, Betsy Frost, who is the, is it CEO of Hoplark Beverages?
Yep.
Is that the right way to say it, Betsy?
Hoplark Brands.
Hoplark brand. So it is a beverage company, and I was first introduced to Hoplark tea, but you, as the Hoplark brand, have lots of other offers. You have Hoplark water, you have craft brews. Is that the right way to say it? Tell us a little bit about what is Hoplark Brands.
Yeah. So at Hoplark, we are trying to bring the joy of hops into people's lives every day in new ways and occasions. So we were founded in 2018 by our founder, Dean Eberhardt, who had given up drinking for a month as part of Whole30 to kind of jumpstart his health and wellness. And he was a home brewer. He's a huge foodie. He was sitting at a brewery with his buddy, Andrew, and he didn't miss beer, but he was like sniffing the beers and missed the aroma and the complexity, and kind of stepped back and was like, why can't you get kind of the complexity that you get in alcohol, whether it be beer or something else, in an NA? It just doesn't exist. And if you could take the real ingredients and that complexity out of alcohol, like the good things about it, and then leave everything behind, what would you get? And so he went back to his like home brew still in his garage and started to reinvent the way that we look at brewing, to extract the actual delicate flavor out of the hops to create something that was yes and. And so that was hop tea in the beginning, which gives you this complexity of hops with 0 calories, 0 sugar, and 0 alcohol. And then as we played more, what we realized is hops is a pretty magical ingredient or a plant. And it, when paired with various botanicals and brewed in the way that we brew it, it can bring out the flavor of other botanicals without that kind of hoppy taste, but it gives this bold complexity to vanilla bean or lemongrass. And so now we have this range of products that you can enjoy hops beyond kind of beer occasions. So for the beer occasions, we have Hoplark 0.0, which are our craft brews, and they are beer style drinks, but with 0 calories, 0 sugar, 0 alcohol. And then we have our hop teas, which help you enjoy hops throughout the day. Some of them are really hoppy. There's literally a brand or one of our SKUs called Really Hoppy, all the way to hibiscus and calm, which are more unsweetened flavor bombs, we like to call them. And now we have our sparkling water line, which really uses hops to bring out real ingredient flavor. So Spindrift is the only other sparkling water that only uses real ingredients. We just literally brew the like we brew vanilla beans and then we hop it for a bolder flavor and more premium sparkling water feel. So the joy of it is that you have this experience, like whether or not you're having a beer occasion and get to do something good for yourself in addition to, like, you don't have to worry about the calories even, or even having 0.5 alcohol. It is all good for you. But then during the day of having these happy experiences, it's like a little vacation. It's just like, oh my gosh, that was fun. And it's a moment that lets you thrive a little bit and enjoy kind of a moment in the day, regardless if you're having some with caffeine or without caffeine, but just enjoying taste and flavor in a different way.
I love this because you mentioned that your husband is kind of a natural foodie. And I also consider myself a foodie. My mom is kind of the original foodie in our family. And having these flavors is such a huge part of what people miss when they take alcohol out, because often, cocktails are ritualized and flavors are highlighted. And, we have this, influx of like sparkling water, but people will often tell me, clients that I work with or people who are curious about, like, what do you drink? And it's like, well,
Yeah.
goodness, the beverage companies are coming along and they are offering these very interesting, complex flavors that are right in keeping with this joyful experience like you're talking about. Like, I don't want people to feel deprived on their alcohol-free journey. This is a place where we can lean into new experiences that actually enhance our daily life. And so I think that it sounds like Hoplark is really focused on that part of the journey and these three categories that you are sort of involved in really do, like you said, they offer everything from a sparkling water experience to a more calming tea experience or a caffeine experience and a beer experience. So, yeah, I can't wait to try some of the others. I noticed that you have a very interesting beer that caught my attention, or beverage, a 0.0 that caught my attention you called a breakfast beer. Is that right?
Yeah, so we do a limited release every month, and our June limited release was the breakfast beer, and it takes more fruit flavored hop varietals and puts them together, so you get a little bit more of a juicy feel in the morning, and then it has a little hit of caffeine. And really the thought was, there is a history of breakfast beer within kind of beer occasions and pairing, particularly in Germany, pairing beer with sausage. And we said, well, what if we just like played with that and flipped it and took something that like is kind of taboo and like, when you're maybe going out for a long weekend with a game and over Father's Day and playing with the idea of like, why doesn't dad get brunch? Let's give him beer for breakfast. And it's beer that like actually sets you off on the right foot for the day of having this fun little experience, but no alcohol and a little bit of a kick to the morning. So we've had a lot of fun with that one.
Yes. My husband and I actually were introduced to alcoholic breakfast beer back in the day, with the brunch, having something if you don't want the sweeter champagnes. And so we were quite intrigued when the NA beer movement has come along so far that those beers are very tasty. And so, when it's hot here in the height of summer, having a refreshing beverage in the morning without alcohol is like a huge win because, as you mentioned, you set yourself up for the day, but you don't sacrifice any of the flavor or fun.
Totally. But you still get to have the fun of it. I mean, it's pretty great. Like I right now am drinking our sprucey, which is made from hand cut spruce tips in the Colorado mountains that we then brew and hop with a Sabro hop. So you get this like spruce hit with the tropicalness of Sabro that comes behind it. And it literally is like drinking Colorado. There's like nothing more Coloradan than this drink. But I love it because it's just like I wake up in the morning and I'm like, Oh, I feel like I'm in nature. That's how I start my morning.
Yeah. So I'm curious. So, if you think about a beer drinker, wouldn't necessarily be the same audience as a tea drinker. So, and maybe that's an incorrect statement, but like my husband was like, "Wait, tea? What about beer?" So it's interesting to think that you have combined the two. And so what audience are you actually, where's your market share coming from? Who's drinking these beverages?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of have like three different cores of people that drink. I think about a third of people find us because they're looking for something as an alternative to alcohol, and they see hops in the name of the product and are like, okay, well, hops is beer. What we're trying to do is free hops from beer. I feel like beer has kind of held this magical ingredient hostage for thousands and thousands of years, and there really hasn't been a way to express it and discover it outside of that. But if you are a craft beer person, like hops. And so what's fun about Hoplark is that we really dig into different varietals. We use them different ways. We brew in this special way that really brings out the expression of each lot. We go to hop selection, and we have a proprietary way that we actually pick our hops while we're there. So I like to say that we are made by a bunch of very passionate hop heads who just are like super into like what this plant can do. We've played with over 36 varietals of hops and 150 brews. And so really thinking about how that expression can come to life. So if you are a craft beer person, that would be like our second target, because although it is not beer and it doesn't have the malt or the middle, that was actually the original inspiration for tea, was that tea could add some of um, the middleness of what beer does with malt and sugar, that it could give some body to it. And so while it was originally envisioned as like, oh, tea can replace malt, what it has evolved to is now that we have 0.0 that can really push further into beer styles, what it does for tea is gives us our third category, which drink tea and water, are health focused people who are looking to reduce sugar within their lives. And if you look at that kind of unsweetened world of beverage, there's not a lot that's really interesting in the NA space. And so we can provide this unsweetened but fully flavored experience using hops to bring out the flavor of tea, bring out the flavor of the botanicals that are there, that creates these um, bolder expressions of something to drink throughout the day. Now, people still use it in NA occasions, but we find that 78% of our occasions move from NA only to having these moments throughout the day, whether it's a pick me up in the morning or a calm me down in the afternoon or a kick back in the evening. And so the flavors kind of fall into people's everyday life, and you end up being like, oh, I went from beer replacement to, oh, I'm going to like life enhancement. Now I have like something cool to look forward to at lunch or in the afternoon.
I love that. Life enhancement versus just a replacement. You and I talked a little bit
Yeah.
before I hit record about this idea of this isn't a life of deprivation. This is a lifestyle choice of health and wellness and, enjoyment. And so I love that. And I think that what you're offering is so unique because I'm not sure if you know this about my background, but when I stopped drinking alcohol, the first thing I did was become a functional nutritionist. So I went back to school and pursued, I was sort of a wellness enthusiast and I became a wellness professional. And, helping people understand that when you stop drinking alcohol, like the sugar-free sodas and the options that are out there can just be, they can really derail your health and wellness goals. And so having an offer that is flavorful that's zero sugar. My husband and I have experimented with hop water, which is out there, but it doesn't have the tea profile. And so now we're seeing some other brands that are adding maybe some juice to create a slightly, there's a grapefruit one, and they're tasty, but I really like the Hoplark brand because there's more complexity to that.
Yeah.
And, again, when people say, well, I can't just drink water, it's like, well, guess what? You don't have to.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the differences versus some of the other hop waters for us is that we're using the actual plant. And so we're able to get that like natural complexity out of the hops versus using a flavor or an extract, which is kind of the essence of hops. And that's where you really get, I mean, it's harder for sure, but it's worth it in the flavor profiles that come out.
Yeah. And so, you have a 0.0. A lot of NA beers have a 0.5. And that, if I'm understanding, that's because of the sugar and the fermentation process. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, we have no fermentation within our brewing process. Our 0.0s are just basically double hopped waters or teas, depending on the SKU. So, like our West Coast IPA style, which is called our really, really hoppy. It has a little bit of black decaffeinated tea in it to give it a little bit more of the bitterness of a West Coast IPA style, where the Citra IPA style is a double hop water. But you're like, wow, that is kind of a beer experience. So we're not trying to actually be beer, but we're delivering beer styles in a way that only Hoplark would. And if you are looking for a beer-like experience, but are really on this health and wellness journey and don't really want sugar or alcohol, it is a no compromise offering within there. Like there's none of it. You can have a few of them. Like it's not, you don't have to worry about picking up 70 extra calories just to kind of have a replacement.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. And you and I talked a little bit about the idea of, how this has been a personal journey for you and just bringing some awareness into, what am I drinking? And you mentioned to me off camera or before we started recording that you, it kind of started with, pregnancy and sort of some awareness around like, well, I'm not drinking. What else is out there? And then this actually became a career for you. So I think that's fascinating too. You moved from a more traditional marketing background into this NA sort of offer or this alternative beverage space. Can you tell us a little bit about your own journey with this?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll kind of, it interweaves with kind of my professional journey, but, I ended up, I spent 15 years at General Mills, which was a wonderful kind of experience and big marketing experience, but I'd been in tech entrepreneurship before that. I had gone to business school to start a business and almost got derailed in the big company for as long as I was. So I always knew I was going to move back to a disruptive, innovative space. And in 2008, I had met Sherelle Klaus, who's the CEO of Dry Soda. And we were at a women's leadership summit and we became fast friends. And for years, she had been asking me to come over to her company. And Dry had started in 2005 as an alcohol replacement. She had 4 kids. She'd been pregnant for 11 years and didn't feel like there was anything that could replace wine. And so she designed Dry to be a little bit less sweet and more complex. And so that was kind of like my first real, like, okay, like, what is this space? And, back in 2005, the space was really around pregnancy and recovery. And that was like it. And so, watching Sherelle's journey, but we started bringing Dry into the house. And so I started being very conscious, like back then in 2008, before, sober curiosity kind of hit the market. But we started realizing that there are people around us who were drinking less. Some of like my intense athlete friends in particular, where they're on the cusp of this movement. And so we started, and we host a lot. I started having things on hand and always offering the NA first. And it'd be, we have dry, we have these kind of mocktails, we have beer, wine, and then soda, water, right? And so it was like putting that up as a first option for people, so it never felt like a compromise. Because when people are like, "Oh, I have beer or wine, or I have this thing," it's it is the afterthought. And so I just started like building this like consciousness around it and having things around the house. And then when I left, I worked at left Air Mills. I worked at a number of small different companies and ended up working at Dry for a little while. And we wrote a book called The Guide to Zero Proof Cocktails. And so we started like really experimenting on like what we could create and how it mixed with some of the other stuff that was coming up in the market. And I found that kind of drinking less started to seep, if you will, into my lifestyle. And I would have a drink and then I would have an NA. And then in the middle of the week, if I had stuff around, I'd just be like, oh, I'll have that. And so a little bit more unconsciously, my habits started to change because I had surrounded myself with other options that were just as good. And, finding Hoplark came in and kind of found me after that. But I had been hearing about them because I've been in the space. And what was so remarkable about it was it really takes what we were talking about, the best of alcohol in terms of like real clean ingredients into like bold flavors, but then without calories and without alcohol and without sugar. And that without calories part for me personally is like huge. Like I hate drinking my calories. And so finding something that was both clean and fit my personal health and wellness goals was like huge in my own personal mission. And it's been super fun, but that's, now I drink Hoplark throughout the day, but we still have a refrigerator stocked with NA options and some NA alcohol alternatives, depending on who's coming over. And I just find that everyone in my life now is drinking less, everybody. And so it naturally just kind of fits into where I continue to go on my own health and wellness journey.
Yes, that's so important to highlight, I think, for everyone, because, my husband and so I stopped drinking in 2015, and there just really wasn't a lot on the market. And I really wasn't interested initially in replacing alcohol with anything. I was interested more in just enjoying life and exploring, the new space I had in my head when I was no longer consumed with drinking and kind of that cycle. And so when the beverages started to become more popular, these NA offerings started to become more popular, it was kind of a, delight, because it was like, wow, now we're really getting some options. And you mentioned having this environment. And I think that that's what's, also so important to highlight, is that we are now seeing options. We're now seeing a shift in the environment. I have a friend who's a fellow coach, and she says it's not just that alcohol is socially accepted, it's socially expected. And so that can be a tricky place for someone who wants to drink less or is on their own not drinking journey. And so when we start to have more options, what we see is just that the landscape changes. And now we have this empowered choice versus like you said, an afterthought or oh, you're not drinking. And that, I think, is such a gift to our just everyone's health and wellness journey, is that we need to change this conversation, and we are changing the conversation. And as you mentioned, a lot of it can start from this place of just offering more options and allowing people. My husband and I just came back from a short little getaway. We were in Ashland, Oregon for the Shakespeare Festival, and we had several meals out, and it was really exciting to see that
menus are really starting to highlight, dry options, mocktails, NA options. We went to a British pub and they had something called a nonny. And apparently nonny is a British word that means don't talk about it. But they brought it into the non-alcoholic beverage, and it wasn't spirits, non-alcoholic spirits. It was simply just, botanicals and fruit. And
Yeah.
it's really fun to see this moving in that direction for all kinds of reasons, not just the recovery world, but for people to realize that we don't need to be so alcohol centric because there are problems associated in an alcohol centric society.
Absolutely. And I, one of the things I'll highlight about the industry is, to me, I think I have a unique vantage point as someone who grew up watching the growth of the natural food space and have been in that space, for many years as well. But what made it really awesome to be a part of is how purpose driven it was and how collaborative. And it was about creating change within the food system so we all have better options and that you're not stuck with processed food because that's all you can afford. And how do we really make it a part of our holistic, wellness as a community and a global society, not just about, what I'm putting in my own body. And I very much feel the same way about the NA industry. I feel like it's incredibly collaborative. People are looking at the bigger picture across the board of what is the shift that we're trying to make within the world? How do we leave the world in a better place as we move forward? And it's not necessarily like anti-alcohol. It's about pro what it can be. And having a world of options and that surrounds people in their health and wellness journey, wherever that fits within it, and having the options that fit whatever who you are or whatever the occasion is. And that's really exciting to be a part of, is that collaboration and feeling like we're doing more than just making a drink to have in the afternoon or instead of a beer. It really is about supporting a broader change within society, that like you have options. Like this isn't just because it's been this way, because you couldn't drink water back in, the Middle Ages. Like the world can change.
Yes, you bring up a good point. It's like, why did we have such a focus on alcohol, and how did it become more, popular or more of a part of our culture? And yes, clean water is a relatively new concept. And so being able to have that fermented drink that was more pure and they used to drink, such watered down versions of what we have now. We've seen in the alcohol industry that the alcohol content is going up higher and higher. Things are getting sweeter and sweeter. And so I'm curious, Betsy, about your take on a couple of things. And that would be the big companies that are getting into the NA market. Like we see Heineken Zero. We see, my husband just found NA Bush. Is that the way to say it? And then, we've got Coors Edge. And so there's that. And then there is this interesting marketing reversal where we see like Topo Chico going hard. So what's your take on all of that? Like, is this just a land grab? Are they just grabbing their share of the market? Or do you think there's actually some wellness philosophy behind this?
I can't speak for the big companies. I haven't talked to any of those brand managers. I think it's probably a little bit of both. As someone who has worked in a large company, they see the change in the landscape and feel like I got to be a part of that for sure. And I think that is good for everyone, to be honest. It is a recognition that like this is real, that we're investing in it. And honestly, I think the CEO of Athletics said in an article yesterday of like, it's good for everybody, right? Bill was like, when Guinness can have a Guinness 0.0 and you don't know the difference, That's amazing. And that is amazing. And I think that is like good for the entire ecosystem, regardless of what the motivation behind it. If it's a purely business motivation, or I guarantee you that there are true health and wellness motivations of people who work within those companies and are pushing these agendas and trying to like innovate in a way forward. So like, it's probably a combination of both, but I think regardless, the output is a win for all. The flip side of like NAs going into alcohol is also interesting. I I think it's a little bit more of like a business side of where else can we expand these beverages. You've seen it. It's not just Topo Chico. A lot of the Coke portfolio has been experimenting in the space of Jack and Cokes ready to drink. I think there's even um, uh, one with Minute Maid. Like really interesting brands of like where are they going? There's a hard Dr. Pepper, or not Dr. Pepper, Mountain Dew. That was like, I don't know where it is right now, but so you have kind of more traditional beverage companies that have kind of tapped out what they can do with maybe like a traditional sugar line. They've gone to a diet or a zero sugar version, and they're like, well, this is a treat. So if I look at how people use this across the spectrum, they're using it in an alcohol venue. So how do I take that and make it more convenient or more on brand by putting it into a ready to drink? And so I think that is like, I can imagine the like map of like, where can I extend my brand to that people may be using me today, but I don't have control over that space, or I could create a different kind of brand impression. And that is kind of, I could imagine that would be the expansion into alcohol on that side, that it's really about like brand expansion and like looking at where usage is and then trying to capture that as a ready to drink. Uh, but I don't know. I mean, it's some of it is incredibly confusing. Like, the hard mountain, like a hard Mountain Dew or brands like that you would expect. And I know that there's been a lot of like regulation and look at it of like how things are marketed and making sure they're not next to each other, because like that's more confusing on the NA side than it is on the alcohol side. But we'll see. We'll see if it survives.
Yeah, thank you for that, because it's fascinating to me to watch, and I've felt a bit confused. So thank you for saying it's not just me as a lay person. I wonder too, as we're having this conversation, Betsy, if some of it is their market share is diminishing, because when you go out to a restaurant now, you don't just order soda. So they are looking to like,
Sure.
my market share might be eroding because of Hoplark brand and the NA beverages and the mocktail movement and the options that are out there. Now everybody's getting maybe a little less of what used to be your go-to. And that's an interesting part of this conversation as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the traditional soda landscape has been evolving a lot over the last 30 years and moved from sugar to diet, from diet to zero, and just trying to keep up with the change in health and wellness. So, they were kind of the big guys who are being like chipped away at all the time. And so thinking about how you expand market and continue to grow is probably top of mind, I would guess, in those.
Yeah, and
In
it's
those
a little bit
boardrooms.
concerning to think about like, what kids are thinking about, what our minors are thinking about when it comes to like a hard Mountain Dew or a Jack and Coke ready to go, seeing their favorite soda in a new version that is sort of enticing as that, looking at that. So I think it's really, a part of the conversation to be aware of is what are we doing in the marketing piece as far as trying to get younger people into drinking alcohol. And certainly the hard cider movement that kind of came along as a foray into that. I missed that because I stopped drinking in 2015, and I feel like the hard cider wasn't really a thing. But I have a lot of clients who it's like Truly is their thing. And I've noticed, I think Truly has now gone into, is it Truly? Am I saying it right? They've gone into an NA option. They've got just water now.
White Claw.
Oh, White Claw. Thank you. White Claw. Yeah. Yeah. And that's funny too, to see that they pulled the alcohol out so they could compete in the dry market, which kind of makes me chuckle.
It's a little bit funny, but I mean, the good side, what I will say about the good side of like kind of kids and youth coming up is like two things. One is like kids are opting out of drinking more and more. Like there is a 20-year trajectory of high school students drinking less year on year, which is like, I know they shouldn't be drinking anyway, but it is an indicator, not even to mention, you can see the same thing within college. And kids are coming up with more tools to think about their mental health and wellness, understanding alcohol's impact on that. Now, there's other things coming up as well, whether it's marijuana, THC, but there is a whole shift away from alcohol. And some of it's driven, as I said, by mental health and like the amount of mental health conversations that we have and the awareness of that. Some of it has been driven by social media and like, I don't want my behavior captured for other people to see. So some very like positive choices are being made that are following people throughout their life. The other thing that's happening that I can see even in my own household, I have a 7-year-old, is palates are changing. Like she has been brought up on sparkling water, and not to knock a wonderful lemon lime soda brand, but like sometimes she'll get that and she can't drink the whole thing because it is too sweet within her palate. And so this like maturing and changing of palates away from sugar, that is a long-term trajectory of what happens, but I'm starting to see it across the board, and we're starting to see it. So people are looking for things that are less sweet, that fit in kind of this no sugar world, not just because they're trying to avoid sugar, but their palates don't want it anymore. We're training palates to be better. And so I think that's super fun for the next generation who's coming up of like, well, what could they create? What do they want? Because they're looking for things that are different.
Yes. And I talk to my nutrition clients about, our palate has really been hijacked by our modern food system. Things are super hot, super sweet, super spicy. I remember a time when there wasn't entire shops full of just hot sauces. It's like there was one hot sauce. And, it kind of speaks to our changing palate. And I love that you're noticing it swinging back the other way, because when we remove some of that excess sugar, we do start to regain our palate. And certainly alcohol dulls our sense of taste. And so we are moving in the right direction with options like the hop teas, et cetera. So I want to shift gears a little bit, Betsy, because you also have a passion for helping women and mentoring other women, female entrepreneurs, I guess I should say. And so I'm curious because to me, it seems like a lot of female entrepreneurs are getting into the dry beverage market. Is that just a perception or is that true?
No, I think it's true. I think there's a few things behind that. One is people are like, they have their own stories of like what I'm looking for in my palate. And there are a number of women, whether they're going sober or it tends to be in kind of the pregnancy moment where they're like, oh, I feel like I've got nothing. And, where they're just looking to create in some way, shape, or form. So I think you hear that a lot in the female entrepreneurs in the NA space of just recognizing their own need and then feeling like I want to do something. And then it becomes such a point of passion because I think women in general are connectors. And so a lot of women, I mean, people use alcohol for a lot of reasons, but I think women use alcohol a lot as a connection point. And there's, a lot to be said as the mommy wine culture and all of those kind of um, desensitization of like how people are using alcohol to cope. But I also think that they use it to connect. I always think of like the book club, like there's wine at the book club and like, but it's really a connection club. Like no one's really reading the book. And so, when that's taken away, this idea of like, I think it's hypersensitive to women of like, oh, it's weirder for me to connect. I don't know why. Like, I like to have something in my hand. There's something that's like natural about that. And I just feel like a little bit less special when I have a LaCroix or a glass of water. And so I believe that there's like an empathy and a hypersensitivity of women in general in this world of like, I feel like I'm missing something in the connection piece of it. And so you tend to have more women kind of sensitized to be like, oh, no, we need something else here. But the second part of that is particularly coming out of the pandemic where women were like crushed with everything. And that was true before. But the amount of like holding everyone's lives together, jobs, families, social worlds, is that people came out exhausted and fed up of like, you know what? I actually don't have to do that if I don't want to. Or, I feel like crushed at this job. I'm not going to do it anymore. I have options and I can do things on my own. And I think that we've seen this spark of female entrepreneurship coming out of the pandemic, of the recognition of like, oh, I can make my own path. And that is incredible. You can make your own path, and you can make your own path whether you start your own company or not. I think that's the biggest thing to realize. Like if I had to have like a theme of my career, it's that I have recognized when doors open. And I have been very open to opportunities that were never on my radar. And in that, I have a choice of what I want to do. And we get stuck in these things. And as someone who was at a big corporation, which I have nothing but good things to say about, but you get caught in the system of like, this is the definition of success for me right now, this thing. And then if you step yourself back, you're like, is it? But is it like, just because that's that company's values and there are people who are very successful within that system, it doesn't mean that has to be me. And if if I like to operate a different way, there are many places where I can go and do that. So I am going to take responsibility for myself and go do that someplace else. Instead of always trying to push the rock up the hill to like fit yourself to whatever the container is, you can change the container and then make it fit yourself. And I think we're just seeing more of that coming out of the pandemic, whether it's people starting their own companies or being very conscious of like, oh, okay, like I don't have to change to fit this culture or this experience. I'll go find the thing that fits me. And that's what I encourage people the most to do, because once you're in your own flow and find the thing that fits you, like you can do whatever you want. But if you're using all of your energy to show up as a different person, like, oh my gosh, that's just such a constraint on your life because you're using all that energy at work. Like that means it's being sucked out as like the rest of your life as well. So it's a lot of what we talk to people about. But I think those two things, when I talk to female entrepreneurs in the NA space, and I talk to a lot of them because they're awesome people and they're inspiring. And like, it's just great to know that there's a cohort of people that we can lean on and talk to. I kind of get those themes that come out of it.
Yes, and that's such a great point, because we do sometimes as women feel like we are coming in, we're putting ourselves last. And what you're really talking about is this beautiful idea of noticing where you are pushing the rock up the hill and allowing that there's new ways to do things and empowering ourselves to do things differently. I stopped drinking at 55. So I went to nutrition school, and at 56 I opened a business, and then I've continued to run a business, and I went full time in 2021. And I mean, I am, learning and growing all along the way. And so this place of solopreneurship really does demand, I think, that women step up and support one another. And I think that what you're doing is so important because we can get caught in that place of feeling like we're all alone. And it can feel so challenging when, especially like for someone at my age, where you're trying to learn tech and it's not your first language. It's not a native language for me, and then we're also, I never ran a business before. And now I've run 2 different businesses, allowing that you get to constantly reinvent what it looks like for you, but we do need support, and having the support of other women is also super powerful because there's so much connection about, well, how do we navigate the caregiving status and motherhood and the roles that we play as women and create this beautiful life of giving back in a career that we're passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, so I help co-lead mentor circles for women in the natural product space through this organization called One Step Closer and the Jedi Network. And it comes out of a deep passion of mentorship. I ran a group called Women in Leadership at General Mills across the organization as well, based on this mentor concept. And what we find is, regardless if you're a solo entrepreneur or if you're an executive or if you're a woman in a function, everyone feels like an only. And it is very isolating, and particularly in levels of leadership. So everything that you're saying about being a solo entrepreneur and like having to create the connections and the community and the network, because it's hard to do it alone, is something that everyone in almost every company feels like. And I just want to say that out loud, because what we have to do is, women are made a little bit differently than men. And we need connection and real connection to be able to be open and completely transparent with each other. And through those bonds, there is growth and strength. And when women feel supported by other women, they are more likely to be successful. That is like a proven stat. And so we have not only responsibility to each other, but, I think that there's this, this like cloud that happened for years as women got more successful. They weren't pulling the next generation up in a way that, even if they thought they were, because what it requires is like that transparency of connection where you can really be open and honest with someone. And so creating those networks for us as professional women and finding your group that like you can actually talk about issues of work with, or the group that you can be like, I have a really stupid question. Like I cannot find my file, which happened to me yesterday. I almost broke down in tears with a woman who I work with, and we were on Zoom. I was like, you're going to see me melt right now if I can't find this file. And just being open with people like that is incredibly important, because the energy that comes back that enables us to be successful is real. But it is remarkable that regardless of the role, the company, how many people are around them or not, almost every woman has that feeling of like, I'm all alone. And like, do I know what I'm doing? Do I not? And the answer is, you do. And you need other people sometimes to help, get you there and support you up with it.
That's so true. I see that as well. And so I actually have a partner, Maggie Clausens, and I started a community in earlier this year called the Sober Hive. And it's not exclusively for women, although it has been women who have joined so far. But it is a space for entrepreneurs and business owners in this alcohol-free space to come together because I'm obviously a coach, but I'm also a podcaster. And, so we are looking for product purveyors, experience leaders, authors, because we can collaborate, we can share each other's audiences. We can not only support each other as entrepreneurs and solopreneurs, but I think when we come together as women and people in this space, we can also further this movement. And for most of us, Betsy, it is a mission driven, passion based place that we're coming to put this offer in the world.
100%. That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah, it's been really fun.
Very exciting.
Yeah, I also have, you mentioned book club, and I was chuckling because I also have the Sober Edge book club because I wanted to take back book clubs and allow women who are, newly alcohol free, sober curious, sober serious, to have a book club that wasn't all about, I call it, my old book club is the Wine and Wine, WINE and WHINE. We just complained about, bitched about life and drank a lot of wine and never read the book. So we're doing book club a little differently. So I love all of these points that you're making about how, this new evolution that, kind of like the underlying piece is this awareness of more choices in the beverage world, but we're really talking about more choices in life. And I think that this is beautiful to have this conversation where we can kind of see this through line and weave this together and notice that this really is a place of empowerment and opportunity and, like you said, those moments of joy.
Yes, absolutely. The one thing I'll say when people talk about not drinking, and even in health and wellness, and like as you're making changes, it's often about what you take away. And I like to think about it as, well, what am I adding? And it's not just the moments that I'm adding, but what do I get to add and enjoy, and thinking about how to string those little moments of what you're adding every day to become something so much bigger than taking anything away. You don't even remember that, oh, that was something I took away. So really like changing the frame of how do we add more. Professional women often talk about saying no and like being able to say no and setting boundaries and all of that is totally true. I'm not saying that's not. And you do have to know, you can't say yes to everything. But I have been in the last year saying yes to people. So anyone who reaches out to me, I try to say yes to, like within the scope of what I can handle, and using connection moments of like, I don't know, I'll say yes. I'll see what is going to happen. And that has been a way that I've been adding these moments of joy and discovery and journey and opening up new doors. Is what's it going to hurt me to say yes if someone asks for a coffee or a lunch or a reconnection or a new connection, and finding that thing that you can commit to say yes to just for a little while can like totally change the frame of how you're creating change within your life.
That's so beautiful. I love that. Yes, I was one of those women who never struggled with saying no. I struggled with saying yes. And I think I'm a bit of a unicorn because most women, they talk about, oh, I say yes too much. But you said something early in our conversation. You said yes and. And I think that also is beautiful because it is this place of expansiveness. And that's really what I think brands like Hoplark Brand are bringing this opportunity for us, is to expand our vision, our world, our opportunities, our connections. So tell us where people can find Hoplark.
Yeah, you can find our teas and waters nationally at Whole Foods. and other kind of specialty retailers. You can find the Hoplark 00 in your NA beer set. So basically sits usually next to Athletic. And then you can always find us at hoplark.com, where we have all of our offerings. And then we have this monthly limited release program, which is really fun and can take you on some really fun discoveries.
Thanks for saying yes to coming on the podcast and sharing your vision and a little bit of your background. It's really delightful to have met you, and I can't wait to see where Hoplark goes in the future.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it.
I want to thank you for tuning in to the Sober Edge podcast. This is a place for important conversations and a safe place to question everything you thought you knew about drinking. If you're looking for your sober edge, I want to invite you to connect with me at thesobernutritionist.com, where you can grab my free resource, Becoming More, a guide to loving your sober life. And I would be so grateful if you enjoyed this podcast, if you would leave a rating and review, as it will help more people find their sober edge.